Hello there and welcome to the very first episode of Surrounded by Bourbon with me, Phil Crawford, aka Causeway Whiskey. So I'm going to admit that I am not new to the world of whiskey reviewing, although I am new to it on YouTube. I have been reviewing whiskey now from the comfort of behind a keyboard for the last 8 years or so with my website www.causewaywhiskey.com and a few other websites as well. But as I say, this is now my first foray into the world of YouTube reviews. And you may be wondering, well, why now? And why are you entitling this series Surrounded by Bourbon? Well, I originally hail from the north coast of Northern Ireland, very close to the Bushmills Distillery in County Antrim. But last year I made a bit of a life change and I've moved to Florida here in the US of A. And so I've left behind the easy access to a lot of wonderful blends and single pot stills and single malts from Ireland and also lots of whiskey from Scotland, and I now find myself with lots more access to the world of American spirits, particularly bourbon, that we didn't have back home in Ireland. And the reason why I'm deciding to go down this little rabbit hole is because, maybe rather unfairly in Ireland and the UK, we tend to think that bourbon is just slightly boring. It's a bit of a one-trick pony, and that maybe is unfair. So I want to give the world of bourbon an exploration. I want to find all those really good American drams that I can recommend to people back home and show that it is indeed not a boring drink. So I'm going to cover most aspects of American whiskey. Just going to look at bourbon, we'll look at rye, American single malts. Maybe later on I'll eventually dabble with some of the Irish whiskies we can get here and Scotches as well, maybe some world whiskies and so on. Anyway, where to start? Well, I thought, why not start with probably the most famous American whiskey brand that there is, Jack Daniel's Old No.7 brand. Now I'm going to admit that this was a bit of a gateway whiskey for me back in the day. When I was legally allowed to drink in 1998, Americana was a really big thing back home. American brands seemed to be pretty cool, so lots of people were drinking American beers like Miller and Bud, and also bourbon was definitely having and American whiskies were having a bit of a moment, and Jack Daniel's was right up there. If it was good enough for Lemmy, it was definitely good enough for me. Now, back then I had a bit of a sweeter palate, I would admit, and I did drink my Jack Daniel's with Coke, so don't shoot me for that. And I will have to say that as I have moved along my whiskey journey, that Jack Daniel's is probably a brand that it's not one that I would readily reach for all the time. So with that being said, why not dig a little deeper into Jack Daniel's here, see what my thoughts are, and I'll give you a little bit of history about the brand as well before we get into the nosing and the tasting. So Jack Daniel's was originally established in 1866, but the distillery was actually rebuilt in 1875 by Jack Daniel and Dan Call, who then hired an ex-slave called Nathan Nearest Green to be their master distiller. Now, one of the things on the label that always stuck out to me was the Old No.7 brand. I was always wondered where did that come from. Apparently there are a few theories about that, but the one that I came across was that this refers to it being the 7th distillery that was founded in Tennessee's 4th tax district. So it seems logical enough, and a pretty cool little nod to their backstory. Now you may have noticed that I did refer to this as an American whiskey, not a bourbon. I know that if I had called it a bourbon, the comment section probably would light up with a lot of people correcting me. So this is known as a Tennessee whiskey. However, it could still also classify as a bourbon. The reason being is that the mash bill is 80% corn, it's 8% rye, and it's 12% unmalted barley. And it's distilled to 70% ABV or 140 proof before it's put into a barrel. So it meets all the technical specifications to be called a bourbon whiskey. However, Jack Daniels, they go beyond with one extra step to make this a Tennessee whiskey, and that is the Lincoln County process. And that is where their new make spirit is actually filtered through 10 feet of sugar maple charcoal. And this actually occurs for 6 days before it's put into the barrels. Now, one thing about this is there's no age statement in this. So we don't really know what age the contents are, but apparently it's between 4 to 7 years of age. However, as Jack Daniels on their website highlight, it's put into a bottle when it's ready, and who can argue with that? So, like many whiskies over the years, Jack Daniels has changed. So when this was taken over by Brown-Forman in 1987, Jack Daniels used to be bottled at 50% ABV or under proof. But not long after that, it began to become watered down to 43% ABV or 86% proof. And then from 2002 onwards, it was brought down to 40% ABV or 80 proof, and it has stayed that way since. And apparently the reason was so that you could just get more liquid out there. Interestingly though, Jack Daniels have recently resurrected the 50% ABV statement with the Bonded series. That's a series that I will definitely get into reviewing later on. But for now, we'll concentrate on old No.7 and we'll go into the nosing and the tasting. So, on the nose, I wouldn't say that it's the most expressive nose in the world. And the first thing that I do kind of get is a bit of nail polish remover or acetone, closely followed by a very ripe banana note. There's also some toffee apple in there, some vanilla. Probably for people in America they won't get this, but I kind of smell rich tea biscuits, which are a very popular type of biscuit that we have back home that you have dumped into your cup of tea. So yeah, I mean it's an okay nose. It's not setting my wall on fire right now, but we will go on and have a taste, okay? So the first thing I would notice is definitely a little thin on the palate, a little watery. It's also quite spicy on arrival. There's a little bit of alcohol heat. There's also like hot cinnamon too. It's also quite astringent, kind of like dries your mouth very quickly, so there's definitely a lot of oak influence there. So we'll go for another sip here and just see if we can get a little more. So that banana note comes through now, but it's more like those little foam banana sweets that we get at least back home in Ireland and the UK. I don't know if you get them here in America. So it's kind of like an artificial banana taste. You definitely get the corn coming through. There's caramel, and there's still quite a lot of oak going on, and that dryness is it's a bit overwhelming. Finish wise, I mean, it's pretty short. With some lingering oak, some tannins, a bit of spice, a bit of warmth. There's not really a lot of flavour left on the palate. Like, you know you've drank something, but there's not a lot of flavour hanging around there. So, how would I score this? Well, with the website, I use a 10-point scoring system, and so I'm going to stick to that actually with the YouTube reviews. So how do I score things? Well, I take price into consideration. I see how complex it is, whether the drink is balanced. Do I consider it value for money? So when I think about those things, it's only cost $20 over here, and it's probably roughly the same back home in the UK and Ireland. You pick it up for maybe £18 that you want in the supermarket or off license. Something that is very approachable on the money side. Is it balanced? Yeah, it's pretty well balanced between the nose and the palate, but there's not a lot of flavour development goes on, and so it's not the most complex whiskey in the world. And I did find it just maybe a little harsh with the alcohol and the acetone kind of notes. So for me, I would score that a 4 out of 10, which means that it's okay, but there's a few flaws evident. It's not undrinkable, and I can see why people do want to drink Jack Daniels, because it is very easily approachable. It's just not the most exciting whiskey on the planet. So yeah, a 4 out of 10. I did have an idea that I would maybe make things simpler in YouTube and just go for a two-way scoring system. Whether if you wanted to buy it again, it would be a whiskey score, and if I was definitely not going to buy it again, I would call it a whiskey bore. So I'm kind of going to keep that in these as well. I think anything below probably 5 is going to become a whiskey bore, and so this ends up in the whiskey bore category. Anyway guys, thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comments if I've missed out anything that you think I should have mentioned about Jack Daniels. Are there any of the other products in the range that you would like me to review? And even just comments about the scoring system. I'm going to put a link in the description giving my 10-point scoring system so you can see how that works. And yeah, hopefully the content will get better as time goes on and I get a little more confident behind the camera. But anyway, thanks for watching. Apparently you're also not to like, subscribe and all that sort of stuff. So if you want to, and you want to hear an Irish guy drone on about American whiskey, please do that. Please support the channel. And thank you very much for watching, and I will see you the next time.